When she smiled, it felt like the first sunrise after years of storm clouds, and when she touched me, it was as if every dark corner I'd ever hidden in had bloomed with warmth. But no one told me that some gardens feed on flesh, that love sometimes burrows deep with roots made of razors, and that the most beautiful things we grow can tear us apart from the inside out. I met her in early spring, in the kind of town that gets swallowed by the woods as soon as you turn your back on the highway, where everything smells like moss and old secrets, where the air clings to your skin like breath from something you can't see, and I was just passing through. Until I saw her barefoot in the garden behind the boarded-up chapel, her hands plunged wrist-deep into the soil, her hair sticky with rain and her lips murmuring to things that didn't answer in any language I'd ever heard. She looked up when I stepped too close, and her eyes were green the way bruises sometimes bloom before they fade, and her voice, God, her voice, slithered right under my ribs when she asked if I'd help her with the planting, said she needed someone with strong arms and a hollow heart, and I told her I was just a traveler with nowhere to go, nothing to offer but the bones in my back and a willingness to stay as long as she needed, and she smiled like the moon was hiding behind her teeth. I didn't ask what we were planting when she handed me the bag. Not seeds, not bulbs, but little chunks of meat, slick and soft and still warm, though she said nothing about where they'd come from, and I didn't press, because something in her face told me that questions grew thorns here, and I dug so deep that my fingernails bled and my spine ached, and still I kept digging, because every time I stopped, I swore I could hear the ground beneath me pulsing like a second heartbeat. That night she let me sleep beside her, and her breath smelled like soil and sugar and rot, and when I kissed her she laughed, low and feral, and told me I'd planted something inside myself too, and that it wouldn't take long before it started to bloom. It started with the itching, not like a rash or a bug bite but deeper, underneath the muscle, like something waking up in the meat of me, writhing in slow spirals through my gut. And every time I scratched, I found dirt under my nails, though I hadn't touched the garden in days, not since she told me I'd done enough and that it was time to let them grow. I asked her what we were growing, what she'd given the soil and what I'd carried into myself, but she just cupped my face and whispered that love was a seed you didn't get to name, and that I should be grateful she chose me to carry it, because it meant I was fertile and full and ready. And when she said it, she bit her lip so hard she bled, and the red looked black in the candlelight. By the third night, I couldn't sleep without dreaming of worms curling through my veins, of leaves tearing their way out of my throat, of my skin splitting in strips across my abdomen as wet roots pushed outward, and when I woke up gasping, I found muddy footprints on the ceiling above me and scratches on my chest that didn't come from my own hands. She sang to me in the mornings, sang to my belly like a mother would to the baby inside her, and when I tried to leave, when I stumbled to the edge of the woods and called for help with a voice that barely worked, something answered, but it wasn't human, and I turned back with my legs shaking and bile rising in my throat, because the trees were watching me, and they were hungry. That night I vomited up petals, red and slick and veined like tongues. And she kissed them from my lips and told me I was blooming beautifully, and that if I stayed just a little longer, I'd be able to give birth to something the earth hadn't seen in centuries. She made me drink the tea brewed from the garden, thick and bitter and black as congealed blood, full of bits I didn't want to look at too closely. And every sip burned its way down like acid, but she held my mouth open and whispered things that made the walls bend inward, things about sacrifice and rebirth and how the flesh was only the soil we used for better things. By then I could barely walk, the weight in my gut swelling like a tumor ready to split, and my skin was stretching too tight over the bulge that throbbed just beneath my navel, and I could feel it moving. Coiling, unfurling, twitching like something with limbs or vines or both, and every time I screamed, nothing came out but a wet, green hiss. She drew symbols on my back with a knife, slow and careful, humming while the blood ran down my spine and soaked the mattress, and she told me they were ancient markings for fertility, for blooming, for opening up to the gods that lived beneath the roots, and I cried, but I let her finish, because I couldn't stop her anymore, and maybe some part of me didn't want to. The next morning, the flowers in the garden had grown taller than the house, their petals stained with rust and meat and pulsing veins, and when the wind blew, they groaned with the voices of things I tried to forget, of the people she'd buried in pieces, and I realized they weren't flowers, they were mouths, open and gnashing, eager for more. She told me it was almost time, that the thing inside me was ripe and ready, and that the harvest was sacred, necessary, and beautiful, and that she'd cut it free with her bare hands if she had to. It happened under the full moon, on a bed of torn roots and rotting leaves, with candles burning low and the sound of something ancient whispering through the trees like wind that had teeth, and I was naked, sweating, crying, trying to hold myself together while she knelt between my legs and told me to push. But it wasn't a child I was delivering. It was a tangle of vines slick with gore and twitching with hungry intent, something with thorns for limbs and a face that looked too much like mine, and it screamed the moment it touched the air, not like a baby but like a chorus of broken voices howling through an open wound in the world. She kissed it and fed it from her wrist, slicing deep and letting it lap at her blood, and it purred like a satisfied animal, its roots curling around my legs as if it knew me, as if it wanted to crawl back in, but she pulled it close and said I'd done enough, that I'd been a perfect vessel, and now it was time to plant me too. I begged her, screamed for mercy, but she just smiled that same blooming smile and said, "You've been hollowed out, my love. Now you're just fresh soil." She dug the hole beside the others, shallow, but wide, and shoved me in while the thing I'd birthed crawled across my chest and burrowed into my throat with tendrils slick with blood and sap. I don't remember dying, not exactly. I just remember the cold, the dirt in my mouth, the roots wrapping around my lungs and pulling me still, the worms curling through my eyes until I could see in every direction at once. And now I'm part of it, part of the garden, listening to the others hum their agony in the soil. She still walks among us, feeding us flesh and watering us with blood, whispering to the new ones she finds, the ones like me who didn't know how to run fast enough or far enough, the ones who thought love was something beautiful instead of a seed waiting to split them open. And the thing I made, it grows. It grows tall and wild, and every night it howls in the wind like a child who remembers my voice and wants to wear my face again. And sometimes, just sometimes, she whispers to me, says she misses me, and digs her hands into my dirt-filled chest just to feel my heart still trying to beat.